Hi everybody, my name is Amanda Giguère. I'm the Director of Outreach for the Colorado Shakespeare Festival, and I want to thank you for being part of the Colorado Shakespeare Festival's Willpower Festival, which is a collaborative event in which Boulder area schools work together to perform one Shakespeare play, with each school taking on one section of the story. So this year we have 5 local schools performing Much Ado About Nothing. In the spring, your students will prepare their assigned scenes, but how you stage the scenes is totally up to you. Your students will memorize their lines, prepare their costumes, figure out blocking, which means where you move on the stage, work on projecting their voices nice and loud, and they'll work together to figure out how to tell their section of the story. And then on Monday, May 15th in 2023, your students will come to campus, to the CU Boulder campus, to perform their scenes in the newly renovated Rowe Green Theater. They'll eat lunch in the Shakespeare Gardens, and they will celebrate their own performances and the performances of their peers. It's a really fun event. It's a way to empower your students through theater and encourage them to work together, to take risks, and to stretch their imaginations and tell the story in a creative way. So the purpose of this video, which in lieu of a real-time meeting with all of you, I am filming in my kind of messy office. There's construction going on outside, so I hope you can hear me okay. Maybe I'll edit some music underneath or something to cover up the sounds of construction. But the purpose of this video is really to familiarize you, the teachers, with the plot and the characters of Much Ado About Nothing, so that you know enough about what the play is about to then give you some tools for your classroom as you prepare the play with your students. The goal of the Willpower Festival is really all about connecting kids with Shakespeare and with themselves. This is a very student-centered activity. Your students are the meaning makers. I'm going to keep emphasizing that point. There are no right answers in a Shakespeare play, and the more you can avoid the idea of the teacher as the expert or the teacher as the explainer, but instead your students get to figure out what the words mean. The play gives them everything they need to be able to figure out what's happening in the play, but really the more you can turn it back to your students as the meaning makers, the better. There's no correct interpretation. A Shakespeare play does not have one single stable meaning, but it's flexible, it's fluid. The meaning shifts based on where we're setting it, when we're setting it, who's performing it. There's no such thing as getting Shakespeare right because, again, the meaning depends on you, the meaning maker. So when you get stuck, try using curiosity and turning it back over to your students. What do you think is happening here? When it comes to Shakespeare, adults often have a lot of Shakes fear. Fear around getting it right, fear that you won't understand all of it, fear that you can't possibly uncover the intended meaning. I encourage you to get rid of that Shakespeare in whatever way you can so that you don't pass that on to your students. When CSF artists and directors and actors gather in a room, we don't have one person who's in charge of figuring out what the play is about. We are all the meaning makers. It happens in rehearsal. The meaning gets made in rehearsal. Remember a sense of play as you said about this project. This should be fun. The plays are meant to be performed and put into our bodies and our voices, so I encourage you to get playful. There is nothing sacred about Shakespeare. Shakespeare is just a tool for you to play with. If you find yourself scared of messing up, remember that these plays are more like Play-Doh. There are things that you can experiment with and play with them, and you're not going to break them. So have fun with it. All right, so the play we're doing is Much Ado About Nothing. Whenever I start working on a new Shakespeare play, I like to look to Good Tickle Brain, a brilliant Shakespeare webcomic created by artist Mia Gosling. So I'm putting up a slide of what Mia says Much Ado About Nothing is about. I've put together some fun facts about this play, but just as a caveat, you really don't need any fun facts about the play to be able to teach the play. But this is just to get you started if it's helpful. We think the play was probably written around 1598, just before Will Kemp, the great comic clown, left the company. We know that Shakespeare adapted some existing storylines to come up with most of the play, with the exception of the character Dogberry. Dogberry is all Shakespeare's invention. The title of the play, Much Ado About Nothing. In Shakespeare's time, the word nothing may have been pronounced more like noting, N-O-T-I-N-G. And in many ways, when we think about a play about noting, that echoes another word: to note, to observe, to overhear, to eavesdrop. There is a lot of noting, noticing, and eavesdropping that happens in this play. So what's the play about? It is helpful to think about the characters in three main groups: the soldiers, the household of Leonato, and the watch. Act 1, which will be performed by Whittier, begins in Messina. Leonato, the governor of Messina, learns that the prince Don Pedro is returning home after a victorious battle. Don Pedro arrives, accompanied by his soldiers, including the bachelor Benedick, the young and rather quiet Claudio, and the prince's half-brother, the sullen Don John. While at Leonato's house, Benedick and Leonato's niece Beatrice, who are longtime frenemies, exchange some sassy banter. And Claudio falls in love with Leonato's daughter, Hero. Claudio privately confesses his love for Hero, and Don Pedro offers to woo Hero on Claudio's behalf. Why wouldn't Claudio just ask Hero himself? Great question. Don Pedro's idea is a little weird, but everyone goes along with it. Don John confesses to his friends that he can no longer hide his naturally evil nature. Don John's friend Borachio tells him of Hero and Claudio's romance. So Don John starts plotting to ruin their happiness. Act 2 will be performed by Douglas Elementary. Leonato throws a wild party at his house to celebrate his friend's return from war, and lots of partygoers disguise themselves in masks. Beatrice dramatically swears she will never get married. Later, Beatrice mocks Benedick, who's wearing a disguise, when they dance together, and that really hurts Benedick's feelings. Don Pedro dances with Hero, and he gets her to agree to marry Claudio. However, before he can deliver the good news to Claudio, his brother Don John takes the opportunity to misinform Claudio that Don Pedro is in love with Hero and is really wooing her for himself. And Claudio actually believes him. However, by the end of the night, the confusion is sorted out, and Hero and Claudio make plans to get married. To pass the time until their wedding, the revelers hatch a plan to make Beatrice and Benedick fall in love with each other. Meanwhile, Don John plots with Borachio to destroy Hero's engagement by making Claudio believe Hero is unfaithful. The plan that they craft is that Borachio will flirt with Hero's friend Margaret, who actually looks a lot like Hero and will be wearing Hero's clothing, while Claudio watches from afar. Meanwhile, Claudio, Leonato, and Don Pedro pursue their plan to trick Beatrice and Benedick into falling in love. When the three men find Benedick hanging out in the orchard, they talk really loudly about how Beatrice loves Benedick, knowing that Benedick is listening the whole time. Hearing his friends gossip about how Beatrice loves him makes Benedick decide that he loves her back. Aww. Act 3 will be performed by Lafayette Elementary. Hero and her friend Ursula play a similar trick on Beatrice. While Beatrice is nearby, they gossip really loudly about how they heard Benedick really likes Beatrice, but it's too bad she's so mean to him. Beatrice hears this and is shocked at all the mean things they're saying about her, and is shocked to learn that Benedick likes her. She decides to like him back. Don John tells Claudio that Hero is not as faithful as she appears to be, and invites Claudio and Don Pedro to witness the proof of her infidelity, which is, again, really just Margaret hanging out with Borachio, but Claudio doesn't know that. The bumbling night watchmen, led by Dogberry and his friend Verges, meet and prepare for their watch. Dogberry also makes a lot of mistakes with his words, saying one thing when he means something else. Borachio tells his friend Conrad about how he and Don John have successfully tricked Claudio into believing that Hero doesn't really love him. The Night Watch overhears this conversation, and they arrest Borachio and Conrad. The next day, with the wedding of Claudio and Hero about to begin, the Night Watch tries to tell Leonato about Don John's evil plan, but Leonato is too busy to listen. Act 4 will be performed by the Friends School. At the wedding, believing Borachio's lies about Hero, Claudio rejects Hero at the altar, saying some really mean things about her, and it's really embarrassing for Hero. She faints, and Claudio leaves. The friar, believing in Hero's innocence, decides that Hero should pretend to be dead, which will at least buy everyone a little time and maybe make Claudio feel bad. If you are questioning the friar's plan here, you probably should be. In general, when things go wrong, do not spread rumors that you have died. When Beatrice and Benedick are left alone, they both admit that they love each other. But their romance is soured when Beatrice asks Benedick to kill Claudio for hurting her cousin Hero. Meanwhile, the Night Watch questions Borachio and Conrad and convicts them for helping to slander Hero. Borachio and Conrad also confess that Don John has fled. Act 5 will be performed by Crestview Elementary. Back at Leonato's house, Leonato and his brother Antonio argue with Claudio and Don Pedro over Hero's quote-unquote death. Benedick challenges Claudio to a duel to defend Hero's honor. Before they can fight, the Night Watch arrives with Borachio, who confesses his part in Don John's plan. When he hears the truth, Claudio repents, and Leonato tells him that he has a niece nearly identical to Hero, who Claudio can marry if he agrees to publicly clear Hero's name. Claudio sings a song at Hero's tomb and prepares for his wedding the next day to Leonato's mysterious niece. It turns out that Leonato's unnamed niece is actually Hero, alive and well, which Claudio discovers at the wedding. Claudio and Hero are reconciled. Beatrice and Benedick learn that they were tricked into falling in love, but they reluctantly admit that they really do like each other. Then a messenger arrives with the news that Don John, who caused all this trouble, has been found and will be punished. They all dance and celebrate. So as you introduce the play to your students, I recommend using the embodied plot exercise, which is an activity that walks students through the story physically, which often helps with comprehension and with memory formation. Putting the play into your body before you know the play is a great way to engage with it. The instructions can be found on our shared drive, but I'll walk you through it. So what happens is, in a circle with the desks moved to the side if you can, let the students know that you're going to be telling the story. And in this activity, their job is to jump into the circle to act out the moments as you describe them. You may want to print out character placards or name tags and cast each participant in a role in advance, or you can invite your students to jump right in without you casting them. You can just judge that based on your students' participation level. You know them best. So what happens is you begin narrating the plot points and the characters improvise their way through the play. The kids then improvise their way through the play, putting their bodies into the story, and they can even act out things that we don't see. This can be a learning tool, but also sort of like an audition, so you can get a sense of who's comfortable on the stage. Some modifications you might want to make after you play out each scene. You may want to clear out the casting choices, giving students the chance to try out roles. For example, if all the kids want to play Dogberry, you may get multiple Dogberries. That way, one student doesn't get stuck playing one character throughout, but you can try it in many different ways. You can also, if you want, cast characters to last through the whole show. For example, if you know that one student wants to try their hand at Hero, they can play Hero as you read the whole scenario. That can sometimes help with remembering what the play is about. If they know, for example, that Claudio was played by Benji throughout, it kind of helps stick the story in their brain. So embodied plot is a great activity, great first way to jump into the play. The construction just got really loud, so I hope you can still hear me. So some curricular connections that I find interesting in this play, which may help as you're introducing the play to your students. One key theme is the power of words. We see a lot of characters spreading rumors, using words as weapons, and whether they're in a merry war or involved in an ill-intentioned bit of gossip, we see in the play that words really do have power. So this play can be an opportunity to think through why words matter and how we can be more intentional with how we use them. As one character points out in the play, one doth not know how much an ill word may empoison liking. In other words, spreading gossip really does have an impact. We often hear sticks and stones may break your bones, but words can never hurt you. This play really does show us that words can be hurtful and words can do real damage. Another key theme I notice in the play is this idea of separating truth from fiction. A lot of untrue things circulate in the story. Claudio hears a rumor about Hero and he believes it immediately. He believes the worst about her. He doesn't go directly to the source, to Hero, to ask her about it, but he acts on misinformation, and people get really hurt. So I encourage you to notice with your students throughout the play, where are all the examples of when lies are spread, and how do people learn to separate the truth from fiction? Finally, I think it's important to pay attention to the backdrop of war that appears in this play. Most of the characters have been impacted by the recent war, and they've probably been through some hard times, and there's this post-war celebratory feeling. So this can be a good opportunity to unpack why some of the harm occurs in the play. Are the characters, especially Don John and Claudio, who perhaps wittingly or unwittingly commit most of the harm, are they perhaps acting out because of their recent experiences on the battlefield? So it's a good chance to talk about context and how our recent experiences can shape our actions. Some other lesson plan ideas that may be fun as you're going through Much Ado About Nothing with your students can be found on our shared drive as well. We have some resources from Good Tickle Brain available for you. These are some resources that you can use to have your students create their own stick figure comics based on the play. That can be a really good exercise for students to think about developing their characters. Instead of having them, build their costume, they can draw a stick figure of their character first, as a good way to start thinking about what does my character care about, what kind of props might my character have. We also have an exercise called One-Line Scenes. We've pulled out a selection of lines from the play, and this is a really fun activity because you, the teacher, will then cut up these lines and lay them out on the floor. Encourage all your students to take one line and then pair up into groups where their job is to take the two lines that they have. Those are the only things they're allowed to speak, but they have to make a scene about it. So they have to figure out, are we two people waiting in line at a bank and we say these lines? That activity is a great way to introduce the language of the play without too much pressure placed on the students to figure out what the words mean. Another resource we have in the drive for you are a series of videos that were created by Sean Scrutchins. He's a teaching artist with the company, and he is one of the actors in the company. You probably saw him play Proteus last year in Two Gentlemen of Verona. And he's made some wonderful videos to support the Willpower Festival. They're available on the drive. So I definitely encourage you to take some time to watch those videos with your students. They're full of tips about how to use your body, your voice, and your emotions when acting. So a little bit about how the Colorado Shakespeare Festival is producing Much Ado About Nothing this year. This does not need to shape your own approach to the production, but you may find it helpful. Much Ado will be directed by Kevin Rich, and it's set in Paris in the 1920s, a post-war period set in the Jazz Age, and Kevin's really interested this year in thinking about how in the play art is really treated as an antidote to war. So the play really in this summer's production will be very much focused on how do we build that sense of release and celebration that all the characters in the play seem to be craving. So I think that's all you need to get you started. Your next steps as you tackle Much Ado About Nothing will be, first of all, to introduce the story to your students and then start thinking about casting. I will be in touch later in probably January or February to schedule a visit with a CSF teaching artist if you want to send someone into your class to work with your students. And please don't hesitate to reach out with any questions as you approach the play. The most important thing, remember that kids can do Shakespeare and have fun. Okay, bye everybody.